For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss Zuma must go, but we must first ensure nothing similar in future leadership. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you.
What is the reason for writing this column?
You know, a lot of people have been calling for Zuma to fall, and it's not clear that they have elaborated sufficiently on the reasons why we need a change of leadership and the type of leadership that we require. If you think that the problem of Zuma is only about Nkandla, then you leave out a whole lot of other things that we need to ask ourselves, are these not important things to avoid in the future? And some of the people who have actually signed petitions have themselves been implicated in wrongdoing in the past over tenders or things like that, or they never said anything. There's hardly been a mention of Zuma's rape case in the various petitions. So what I feel is important is we've got to know, what is it? What are the reasons why Zuma must go? And we must incorporate those reasons into our conception of what it means to have ethical leadership. Now, what is important about the Nkandla matter and unpacking it is that it's not just the misuse of public funds meant for the poorest of the poor, but it is also a case of the president of the country refusing to take responsibility for questions for which he had to give an answer. When he was first asked about the buildings on his property, he said he knew nothing about it. It was decided on by security, public works, and so forth, and it's not even up to him to ask. And as I say in the column, he's the commander-in-chief of all the forces in the country. Of course he can ask. And in fact, the evidence shows that he was inquiring about the progress of these things. Also, he misled the public. To this day, we have not seen the bond that he claims there was. He claims that his family raised the money to pay for the buildings that are not security related. Now, how did they raise the money to pay for it? If we find that it's not his family who did it, who in fact paid for this? Now, we know very, very well that people have been providing funding to Zuma and other people in exchange for something. What are the obligations that attached to these things being required of Zuma? Also, what I think is important is that when Zuma has been questioned about these matters, he and the speaker have used racist responses sometimes and African chauvinist type responses. For example, Zuma has said it's only white people who are worried about this. You think that because I'm a black man I can't afford to build my own house. Now what you do by that is you implying that white people should just shut up. They've got no right to comment on this, because if they comment, they've got racist reasons for commenting. Bladen Zimande also said only white people are worried about Nkandla. And that is a way of trying to close legitimate debate. The speaker said she finds it very distasteful that people are asking all these questions about the president's home. In African culture, a home is a very sacred place, a place where you perform rituals, all these sorts of things. And now they are defiling it almost by asking questions which invade the sanctity of the place that Zuma called home. The truth of the matter is that by failing to answer these questions in good faith, they have shown great insensitivity, because there are very many young people, young men, who want to build homes and they can't afford to build homes. And evidence shows in research by Mark Hunter and others in KZN over a couple of decades that people are getting married later because they can't afford to build a home for their marriage. And what Zuma is doing and what the speaker is doing by trivializing this question of a home, by using fake cultural reasons to avoid debate, is insensitive to these people. So what I believe is important is that we need to understand what are the reasons. There's also the rape trial that is not mentioned. It's had one vague mention by Ronnie Castles, but in general, gender is not mentioned. And Zuma's presidency is characterized by extremely hyper-patriarchal behavior, militaristic conduct, debasing of struggle songs in order to justify his own conduct, sexist remarks about now women are ready to be leaders. He's been with these women all these years. How have they suddenly only now become ready? And then advising them that becoming a mother is a good training for becoming a leader. And all this nonsense about clever blacks and that women, should not be walking with dogs, that's white people things. So there's a whole lot of nonsense that is being used, but it's actually a very dangerous type of African chauvinist ways of affecting the relationship between different African people, black and white, and gender relations.
Now, how should the country take forward this call in a way that goes beyond Zuma and Nkandla?
Well, I think it's interesting who has come out on this matter and who hasn't yet come out. I think it's very important that it's not restricted to people who are veterans of MK, people who've got a military background themselves, children of veterans, all these sorts of things. The banks have shown over Nene and over the Guptas that they have power. Business has power. They must come out and they must call for ethical leadership, stipulate some of the criteria that are required of a future leader. A leader who's accountable, a leader who takes responsibility, a leader who acts in terms of the Constitution. Also, gender-based and sexuality concerned organizations need to raise their voices. Unfortunately, they are not so strong compared with the seriousness, the gravity of the issues. But you've got some important organizations. The legal profession could come out more than they have come. Faith-based organizations. I think this is the time when faith-based organizations, they have come out, but they could come out in greater numbers. So I feel that we as citizens, wherever we are located, if you are in a church or mosque or whatever it happens to be, if you are even in a sporting organization or any organization, you must raise your voice. And of course, in political parties, whichever one you may belong to or support.
Thank you, Raymond. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Crema Media's Polity about Zuma must go, but we must ensure nothing similar in future leadership.